My name is James Mixon. I was born and raised in the East African nation of Kenya. When I tell people I grew up in Africa, they think of bustling cities and colorful marketplaces. Or of this. East Africa is famous for its endless savannas and unparalleled wildlife. Literally millions of tourists parade through Kenya and Tanzania every year. The safari industry is enormous, employing over 1 million people in Tanzania alone and generating as much as 20% of the country's GDP. Innumerable tour companies take foreigners to see elephants and lions. But a lesser-known part of the industry lies a little higher up. Emerging from this incredible African landscape are colossal volcanic peaks. Mount Meru at over 14,000 feet. Mount Kenya at 17,000 feet. And the king of the continent, Mount Kilimanjaro, at 19,341 feet. These mountains were first explored by Western missionaries and mountaineers during the days of David Livingstone, but they certainly didn't do it alone. They recruited locals to guide them, carry their gear, and cook their food. And in a certain way, very little has changed. Today, thousands of East Africans make their living taking foreign climbers up these mountains. I learned to climb on these mountains, and the part of the experience that always struck me the most was this unique culture of men and women who work here as porters and guides. Despite an often difficult way of life, they live and work with a particular resilience and joy in some of the most beautiful places on Earth. I recently returned to Africa, hoping to document what life is like for them. I started my trip by visiting the little town of Naramura, lying at the base of Mount Kenya. It's a conglomeration of street markets, agrovets, and trekking companies. A local porter named John gave me a tour. Life can be hard in Naramura. Jobs are scarce and the land is dry, so the men of Naramura look to the mountain for work.
Being born around Mount Kenya region, that is central province of Kenya, I could wake up every morning and see the mountain there. Well, at our age, you are told the mountain is quite a dangerous business, and people feared the mountain so much, especially the locals. My grandmother and grandfather used to tell me the God lives up there. That is Gai, you call him Gai. It's the God of Kikuyu people. And it was kind of really sacred place to be.
Now, however, the mountain is sacred in a different way. The mountain economy, directly or indirectly, provides innumerable jobs for the local Kikuyu tribe, whether as guides or porters or as cooks for a local hotel. Many people here live at or below the poverty line, and the opportunity to work with wealthy Western tourists is enticing.
First of all, they work because of the money, because they work so that they will help their families. Because most of the porters are married, so they have children, they need to feed the children, and they need to take them to school, and they need to give them clothes and all this.
So most of the communities that do pottering and guiding are subsistence community. They will grow crops and eat it. They don't really need to buy any sort of food, but you need something that requires money. You need to come up with the money. Or I need to buy school uniform for my kids. I need to pay school fees. It's easy money to get from the pottery.
Ruben Maina is a guide on Mount Kenya. He took me to his family farm.
During the farm, the onions are over there. Yeah.
Ruben provides for his wife, children, and parents with his farm, but as the local area has dried in recent years, crops can be unreliable.
The water has become less as many people are now coming to irrigate, and it's not enough.
Many young men turn instead to the difficult job of portering.
For me, to start work on mountain, it was not my choice. It's due to the challenge of life. But now I found it is good for me.
Hussein has been guiding Kilimanjaro for a decade, summiting over 100 times. He has been in charge of as many as 300 porters at once, and he is very clear that for him, as with many other locals, the mountains are a means to an end.
Here in Tanzania, porters, guides, even cook. They are not climbing mountain because they need to climb mountain. For them, that is their job. And what they need is money. If they can allow that someone to do mountain without porters, it means many people, they lost their job. They have nothing to do. They have nothing to do.
Although portering and particularly guiding may pay more than working on the local farm, it is typically still not enough to pay for the equipment and education necessary to safely work in the mountains. Mountaineering can be dangerous, but because these jobs are in such high demand, many are willing to do the work anyways.
The porters, they are not fully equipped. Some of them, you see them, they are not going up with the warm clothes, and also some of them not with good boots. They don't have even sleeping bags, which really is a very important thing to have on the mountain. They are not well taken care of, they are not paid well, and also they are not trained. The first time I was almost losing it because of the luggage is too heavy, the weather is bad, raining and all that. I have to carry this luggage ahead so that the client can get the bag in front. So I thought it's too hard job to do.
Sometimes, desperate young men will endanger themselves and their clients by venturing into an environment they're unprepared for.
Yesterday here is a lot of heavy rain. The guy get here, he don't have clothes, he don't have gears to change, he don't have food to eat. And it's up the mountain. You see the problem, because they want to work.
But even basic wilderness education and medical training can be as expensive as the gear, well beyond the means of most mountain workers here.
A porter being paid $10 per day, for him to accumulate that kind of money, it's impossible for them to pay.
In Tanzania, part of the problem is that instead of enforcing standards of safety and training, the local government is focused on tourism revenue. On Mount Meru and Mount Kilimanjaro, the government has extensive regulations in place to ensure maximum employment for the local people, which is a good idea in theory, but often it just means there are more Tanzanians climbing the mountains, ill-prepared to take care of themselves or their environment.
I can say in general, the African countries or developing countries, they're all corrupted. I can say it like that. And the thing is, most of the things in the government, they are not clear what they are talking, what they are telling people is not what really they are doing.
They certainly didn't want anyone examining their processes. Most of the time I was in Tanzania, I was unable to film openly, despite paying exorbitant fees and acquiring multiple film permits. The rangers even tried to take my cameras from me.
It's a very socialistic country. Having a government authority is important. You have to go through checks through each gate. Here's the permit, gets checked. Next ranger station, permit checked. Unlike any other mountain I've ever been to, including in Kenya, where nobody has to check your permit every day.
Tour operators are forced to jump through bureaucratic hoops. Guides must join superfluous organizations and pay annual membership fees they can't afford. Regulations to limit porters' loads are often distorted or ignored.
I have gone to parks like Kilimanjaro. I have seen people carry luggage on their head. Personally, I don't believe in that. And my fear is the spine. In case of somebody falls down or you jump at a place and you have luggage on your head. If one of the parts of the vertebral column is dislocated, you might have an injury which might leave you disabled the rest of your life.
In short, this is not an environment for incompetence. There are too many factors to be aware of. The altitude, the cold, poor weather conditions, treacherous mountain trails.
The terrain is very difficult. I have walked on these mountains in some areas where I can tell probably no one has been here. Very deep gorges, knife-edge valleys, places where we have a lot of landslide, very dangerous areas.
Kilimanjaro is a very high mountain. The likelihood of getting, pulmonary edema or cerebral edema is high.
We normally get some accident up on the mountain, like maybe clients getting sick, even the porters themselves getting sick, because they're not trained, they're not full, they're not well equipped.
And if you are not well experienced with that, it's hard, it's really hard. That's why rescue in Kilimanjaro now is very risky.
So that brings a lot of problem, and we end up even losing people on the mountain. Yeah, people die on the mountain.
This lack of training in such a serious mountain environment has led to tragedy. In 2015, a young man named Warren Asiu was on a church-sponsored trek up Mount Kenya when he fell ill with high-altitude cerebral edema, a swelling of the brain caused by the extreme altitude on the mountain. His family was gracious enough to meet with me and tell me about what happened.
What should they have seen to have known that something was wrong?
You should have noticed that his health was declining. He was vomiting quite a bit. He was breaking into fevers. He had headaches. His breathing was labored. From basic training, they should have known this. They should have known that to stop this, you just needed to descend at the right time.
By the time Warren was evacuated, it was too late. He died on the way to the hospital.
Mountaineering is not for everybody, and it's not that everybody makes it, I didn't know that. I've later painfully come to learn that even mountaineers, they die in the mountain because of mountain sickness. Sometimes you can make it, sometimes you won't, and the only medicine and the best medicine is when you start getting mountain sickness, you come down, not you continue going up. Come down. Where was the wisdom in the people who are taken in? From what I'm told is that even the porters kept advising that these children need to be taken down. But nobody listened to the porters because they're thinking, what do you know?
Mount Kenya is littered with memorials to foreigners and Kenyan workers who have died or disappeared on its slopes. Sometimes, I wonder if it's worth it. If every time these men enter the mountains, they're risking their health, their livelihood, and even their lives, what keeps bringing them back?
Like when we went to the mountain the first time, we climbed in cottons. We didn't have climbing boots. We didn't have all the fancy clothes that people wear. Our sleeping bags were, incidentally, when I climbed the mountain the first time, that time, I didn't have a sleeping bag. Those days, you went with the bare minimum and you survived. And you are ready for it. And by the time you came down, you knew that, I could survive anything.
This is Njenga Mungai, a Kenyan mountaineer. He probably knows Mount Kenya better than anyone on the planet, and here in Naramuro, he's building a center to provide outdoor education to Kenyans of all income levels and backgrounds.
Because in life, you face challenges, you face failure. And a successful life is not necessarily being successful all the time. I think a successful life is being challenged and failing and coming back. I think to me that is what makes sense in life.
And the mountain?
The mountain basically gives you that training.
Njenga and others like him are on a mission to change the way the mountains of East Africa are climbed.
It was hard because somehow we would get some of these instructors whose mentality was that Africans are not good in the outdoors. And they are only not good in the outdoors as far as they have defined the outdoors. Because if you think about yourself living in Kenya, you've been in the outdoors all your life. And you didn't have to go to a special school to be taught about all these things. Of course, Africa is the outdoors.
Growing up in Naramuro, the boys go out to the fields to herd. And we would be hunting, setting up traps, climbing trees. Boys would gang up and go explore. And so transitioning on towards the mountains, it was no different. So I still feel that, and I still want to be that boy who is exploring, and that's what I feel when I go to the mountains.
Will Wamaru is now an instructor for the National Outdoor Leadership School, where he teaches mountaineering to students from across the world. But his heart is in the mountains he grew up on.
It's a big cultural shift. Mountaineering is sort of seen as a Western concept where you're exploring and mountaineering and enjoying. And a guide, a porter is seen as someone who's getting a job. But I think it goes beyond that. I see people loving that, not because of the money.
We're trying not to wake up everybody else, right?
Hiking at night, for some people it's so cool.
There is a growing movement among East Africans towards climbing mountains for their own sake. Guides like Ruben and Elias, who have been mountain professionals for many years, who are well-trained, well-equipped, and passionate about the outdoors, are fighting to change old perceptions from within their own culture.
Our forefathers, believed that our God lives on Mount Kenya. And they believed that nobody could climb Mount Kenya because they could see the snow from the base of the mountain over there. And they say this is a good cloth of God. It is only God who could walk on the whiteness that they could see.
Yeah, when I left Nairobi and came here, and they were like, oh my God, this place is so cold. How do you guys survive? Do you have enough clothing? And you're like, yeah. We have everything that you need.
As these professional African mountaineers have ventured further abroad, they've also encountered stereotyping from Westerners.
They didn't have any idea of Africa. And the funny thing is that most of them thought Africa is like only one country.
In America especially, people ask, oh, what are you doing here? Like, oh, I was just walking the mountains. Oh. You can see the confusion on their face. What would you be doing there? They were really excited to see that someone who looks like me actually does that. He's like, are there any more? I'm like, damn right there. There's other people who do this.
They didn't even knew that I could know what our crampons are. But to their surprise, I'm even the one who are showing them on how to put on their crampons. They were like, this guy's from Africa, how does he know that things?
The number of Tanzanians climbing that mountain for their leisure is coming higher and higher nowadays.
maybe you have never stepped on a snow. And I have seen Kenyans when they come to the mountain, they normally mix a lot of snowballs, just they are quite excited, they're so happy, So people love it anyway.
How people are appreciating the mountains here is a little different from the Western appreciation of the mountains. People like to dance in the mountains here. People sing.
Of course, it creates its own economy. And that economy, as opposed to the small economy that was outdoors, that was happening to the Westerners, and it was being controlled by the Westerners, so it was actually only benefiting the Westerners. Now here we have formed a new economy, and it's actually being controlled by the local people.
Ruben, you said there are some lions up here, eh?
Yeah, the caretaker saw 3 lions around the camp, and they come in through the elephant corridor on your way to Lewa Downs, because the lions come from a lunch known as Lewa Lunch. Yeah, so through the elephant corridor up to the mountain. But because here it's very cold, they don't stay here for long, and it's very bushy, so they can't see the antelopes, so they just turn back.
It's too cold and there's no food.
It's so cold and there's no food, so they just
run
back.
And it's like most people too, isn't it?
Yes, it's like most people. They come up here, they're so tired, it's so cold, and there's no food. So they're like, let's just move out.
So many things here are natural, and the only thing you can hear from where like I am now is like the sounds of the river, the singing of the birds, which is so cool. And even when hiking up here, it's so meditative, even because there's nothing here, there's no reception, so there are no phone calls. You're out of civilization.
You need to smell the everlasting flowers, the scent. You need to let your eyes just roll over the greenness, the lobelias, the moorlands, to appreciate. And so this is not a value that can only be given consideration by a white person. No. The freshness, the beauty is something that every human being is given an opportunity to appreciate.
And it is tough, and we are doing all this for the love of nature.
That's awesome.
If you don't enjoy the freedom in the hills, that's what I usually say, then this is not your place.
This new charge into the mountains isn't always easy. It takes knowledge, training, equipment, all things in short supply for East Africans. But most importantly, it takes a certain grit, a tenacious optimism. And of this, there is no limit. Perhaps this is what makes Africans such natural mountaineers. Life in Africa is hard, but beautiful. So are the mountains. It will take time for the necessary skills and equipment for safe, modern mountaineering to be available for everyone, but the tide has turned. Outdoor educators and enthusiasts are rising up out of a culture that is uniquely prepared for the wilderness. The Africans have discovered the freedom of their own hills.
And the emphasis here is to try and assure you that you don't have to have a lot of money to enjoy life. You can have very little and enjoy life a great deal.